It's got to be said that Jesus doesn't pull his punches, does he? Every now and then he comes out with stories that are real beauts, and I think this is one of them. Many of Jesus' stories about the kingdom are very confronting, and this is probably one of the most confronting. The sheep and the goats. Mr. Goat and Mrs. Sheep, I think. Yeah, okay. Let's pray. Lord, help us to hear what you're wanting to say to us this morning through this punchy little story. In your precious name, amen. Thanks, Jen. The gospel does have judgment in it, and it would be misleading to overlook that. And I think sometimes in our desire to extend grace to people, we are a little bit avoidant of the matter of judgment. It is unavoidably part of this story, not perhaps in the classic in-out delineation that some of the fire and brimstone preachers might have once offered to us, but there is the judgment of getting what you want. There is the judgment of getting the fulfillment of your desire, in a sense, and the realization of what it's actually going to deliver you rather than what you thought it might deliver you. Now, judgment is actually part of respect, in a sense. It's honouring a person's behaviour or attitude. The alternative to judgment is disrespect. Jesus does not care about what people say and do. If we decide not to take a person's decision seriously, we are failing to give them proper respect. And we might do this with young people, for example. When Pei came into our family, and Wei, our eldest, was only about 3 years old. And Pei came in, and we were a one-child family, and then we became a two-child family. And anyone who's been through that transition knows the oldest child doesn't always work out easily their new position. And my wife Jo is extremely good with this sort of thing, so she got Wei to give expression to her feelings. And she was a bit frustrated that this new kid had come along and was taking up all the attention and all the air and all the food and all everything. And so Jo said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "I want to throw her out the window." Oh, what a jolly good idea, kind of thing. But we didn't respect that decision. We didn't honour it. We didn't take the child and throw her out the window because we know that that's a child's perspective, and we didn't do it. It's interesting, though, as the kids get older, they want to be taken increasingly seriously. And in fact, Pei is now the one who says more than anyone else, "You're not listening to me. You're not taking me seriously." And she wants to be taken seriously. That's what respect is. And so judgment is part of taking somebody seriously and the implications of what they desire. And each group here does actually receive what they desire, if you listen very carefully. The people who have seen and responded to the others around them and attended to those needs get to continue doing so, because that's what the kingdom life is all about. On the other hand, those who don't see the needs of others and are kind of separated and cut off, they are the actions of people who are separated and cut off after all, if you don't see the needs around you, they are effectively blind to what's around them. They get to be separated and cut off. They kind of get what they wanted in that sense. We'll say more about that in a minute. It's also worth noting here that the focus is very squarely on behaviours. When I was first persuaded by the message of Jesus, it was in a particular environment where what you believed, your theology, was paramount. And it was to delineate you from other groups that believed other things. And so you needed to get your theology really right. And it was so strongly expressed that it was kind of like your eternal salvation depends on all the tenets of your theology being just so. It scared the willies out of me because I wasn't very bright and I didn't know that I could work it all out. By contrast, in this story, not a word is mentioned about theology at all. It's all focused on what people do or don't do. It's about their behaviour. Their beliefs and motives and thoughts obviously would be present in that mix, but the thing that shows those are what they did and didn't do. And perhaps the most alarming part of this story is that both groups are unaware. And I don't know about you, but this really scared me when I first heard this story, and it still keeps me on my toes, because neither group really understood the basis upon which they were being assessed. They're going, when, Lord? When did we do those things, or when did we not do those things? About 30 years ago, Joe and I, my wife, went to Delhi to work with some health workers in the slums around Delhi. It was a bit of an education experience for us, a much bigger education experience than we anticipated, really. We had the privilege of working alongside some incredible people, some young, well-educated, mainly women, to be honest, and they just poured out their lives to these slum communities, teaching them about basic health care, helping them to organise their communities and so forth. And these were tertiary educated, degree qualified young people who could have made a lot of money in India's burgeoning middle class, had all sorts of opportunities laid out for them, and they chose to do this kind of work. And I confess that I was completely dumbfounded by this. I thought, well, if you had no other options, maybe you'd do it. But these people had all sorts of options, and they were choosing to do it. And in one moment, quite late into the time we were there, I said to one of the women, explain it to me. What are you here? Why are you here? You could be doing anything. And she said, it was as simple as anything. Oh, this is what Jesus calls us to do. And there was no sense of judgment or irony or anything. She said, no, this is my calling. This is what I do. I don't know how to describe how I felt after that. She was completely unself-conscious about the incredible choice she'd made, it seemed. She just wanted to do what was good to do, what Jesus had called her to do. And in a sense, she's like the people in this story. She didn't see herself doing anything remarkable. She was living life the way you're supposed to live life, completely unself-conscious about it. The people in this story that are on the right were not trying to do good. They don't go, oh yes, I remember I did that thing over there and I helped out the homeless person. They're going, when? I don't remember doing any of that stuff. They were just living their lives. They weren't trying to be good enough. They weren't trying to get into heaven. They weren't trying anything. They were just living the values of the kingdom unself-consciously. Those things that matter most, they were doing. And it became evident that what they did was really good. On the other hand, there was a group that didn't know they were neglecting people. When, Lord? When did we see you and not attend to you? I don't remember that. They were simply doing what they do. And what they do, it seems to have been self-absorbed and neglectful of others. It becomes evident in the judgment. And then you get that little comment about eternal punishment, and many of us are not very comfortable with eternal punishment at all, and the fires of hell and Dante and all that sort of stuff. But I want you to think about this for a moment. What does Jesus mean by eternal punishment? See, I think life is full of suffering. And no matter who you are, if you've been alive for more than about 10 minutes, you've experienced suffering. And the secret of a good life is to live in a way that makes the suffering worth it. You're going to suffer. That's a given. So make choices that mean the suffering that you're going to go through is worth going through. All right? Suffering that has no good purpose or no good outcome is virtually unbearable. Suffering that is never redeemed, or a life that is never reflected upon and understood, a life that is a life of disconnection and never finds connection, these things are very, very difficult to cope with. A person who never finds their place among the other people, because finding one's place is actually one of the ways we understand the meaning of life. So if you spend your whole life keeping everyone at a distance, disconnected, only seeing what you want to see and so forth, there's a punishment or a suffering that is in that. And then if the opportunity to change that is over, then you are in eternal punishment. Someone's trying to send me a message? Okay. I'll keep going fast then. No. Are you with me so far? Do you understand what I'm getting at here? It's confronting, isn't it? I find it confronting. But I think it's there in the story, and I think that we need to do business with this, because when the judgment comes, it's kind of like calling time on the opportunity to change your ways. And I mean, we customarily see that, I think, when you die. So, like, it's game over. You don't get any further opportunities to decide what you're going to do. You've spent your life. You've used up all your stuff. It's done. And I think that's when we discover some more stuff when we think about that. So, next one, thanks, Jen. Because the kingdom that the king invites the people into is Jesus' kingdom. And the ways that will function in Jesus' kingdom are Jesus' ways. And the ways that Jesus did things were self-giving love. He was always about the most vulnerable. He was always about including those who'd been excluded. He was always about seeing those people that were overlooked. That is Jesus' way. That's what will be happening in his kingdom. And if we don't like that, why do we think we'd like to go there? And if we're hungry for that, that's where we belong. I think we do well to reflect on the fact that the thing we often refer to as heaven is really the place where people behave toward one another in a way similar to the way that Jesus behaves towards people. That really is heaven. If you think about it for a moment, that really is heaven. Imagine being in a place where people cared for you so much that they would give themselves for you. Where you didn't need to lock your doors because people didn't want to take from you. They wanted to give to you. And you didn't have to be guarded about what you said because people didn't want to hurt you. They wanted to equip you to do life more effectively. So the more honest you were, the more effectively they could equip you to do life more effectively. Imagine that. That's heaven, right? Imagine that. Imagine an environment where everything affirmed life and just wanted to help you do and be the best you could do and be. That's a heaven I want to go to. That's a heaven I believe we're called to live now. That's the eternal values that have always been good. And they are good now. And they will always be good. And the punishment is the sense of disconnection. I don't think punishment's a particularly good word. Suffering, I think, is really a more effective word in this. Those who were sent away did not want to worry about anybody else. They didn't want to have eyes that could see anybody else. They didn't want to be encumbered with the needs of anybody else. Whenever you hear someone talk about the burden of the disability pension or the burden of the age pension, these are words, you listen to the words, it's not a burden. This is us caring for people. People that don't want to be burdened with caring for other people, they will not be burdened. They will be allowed to go off into nothingness, it seems, into disconnection, where people are no longer able to see one another. Alone. There is a sense in which they will continue in the way they've been accustomed to being. And that is the judgment. You see that? There's nothing else coming, it's just you're getting what you wanted. And that's really scary unless you know what you want. And to know what you want, our lives are the book we must read. Not our ideas, but our actions. If you want to know what's really in a person's heart, look at how they spend themselves. Look at how they live. Our Western way of understanding is we highly value thought, and it's part of the philosophical tradition that goes way back to Socrates and probably beyond that. But there's a deception in too much focus on the thought life. We can think all kinds of things have value, but they may not actually have value in our life. I mean, I've referred to this before, but I think it's a classic example. The way the refugee situation has been handled by successive governments in our country is an illustration of this, because politicians tell us that they're concerned with human lives being lost. They're concerned with the lives of the refugees. They want to stop the boats so that there'll be no more drownings at sea. It's a compassionate move. And we think, yes, I can get behind that. Stopping people from dying, that's a good thing to do. Okay, right. They want to stop people drowning in that bit of water that's close to us, between us and Indonesia or something. Yet, what they did tells us much more than what they said, because in the end, those same refugees end up in a concentration-style camp in appalling conditions, some of whom have died and some have been very ill, and all have been really psychologically affected. And if you care about the well-being of the people, there's something to do there that isn't being done. And so it exposes that it's always been about electoral success. Governments are interested in winning elections, and they'll use whatever mechanisms they need to achieve that. And so we're like that too. We'll tell any story. We'll wrap our situation around in any narrative that serves a purpose that we want. But our actions are far more transparent. They will show us what we value and what we disregard. Our actions show us our values, and our values tell us what we actually believe. Because underneath your values, you believe what's most important. And so actually our beliefs are revealed in all of that. So when we hear this story of welcome and rejection, the sheep and the goats, remember that the clearest indicator of your proximity to the kingdom is how you treat others, not how you try to treat others. And you can train yourself to do this, actually, because our instincts often get in the way. We want to be self-protecting, we want to just get comfortable and all that sort of stuff. But there's a whisper in this. The richness, the fullness is actually in the caring. It's actually in the self-giving. It's in living the kingdom now that we discover the kingdom now. It's not something we need to prove to anyone, and it's not something we need to do well enough in order to pass a test and gain acceptance. It's that your actions will tell you what you value, and your values will tell you what you believe. And in the end, those who genuinely desire the kingdom get the kingdom, and those who genuinely do not desire it will not be forced into it. And that is the judgment. In a sense, the judgment is that the time to decide finishes and the game is over, so to speak. We do not get to decide any longer. So work out what you value and live it now. The eternal values of the kingdom are eternally valuable, always have been, are now, always will be, for all eternity. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you didn't hold back from offering us confronting words that awaken us to who we are and how we live, words that point us to a deeper, richer, fuller way of engaging your world, words that call us into life. We want to hear those, and not just hear them, but hear them with our lives and respond to the glory of your name. Amen.